Strokes of Desire, When a Human Touched the Queen's Skin. The neural translator hummed against Nikolai Thorne's temple as the diplomatic shuttle broke through Azura's pearl-white atmosphere. Earth's foremost xenolinguist gazed out the viewport, trying to calm his racing heart. After 3 decades of interstellar messages, humanity was finally meeting the Azurians face-to-face. "Final approach to the Crystal Palace, Ambassador," announced Captain Lin. "The Azurian delegation awaits." Nikolai straightened his midnight blue uniform adorned with Earth's insignia. "Remember," he told the small diplomatic team, "we're here to secure peace and establish trade routes through the Cygnus corridor. This treaty could prevent decades of potential conflict." Commander Elise Reeves, his security chief, nodded grimly. "Just don't forget they've obliterated 3 other species that crossed their borders without permission." "That's precisely why we're doing this properly," Nikolai replied, checking his appearance one last time. His weathered face reflected years of negotiating Earth's most delicate extraterrestrial treaties, though none as consequential as this. The landing was smooth, the reception formally organized. Tall, humanoid figures with iridescent purple skin lined the crystalline walkway, their bodies emitting subtle pulses of light that rippled across their forms. Nikolai recognized the formal, greeting pattern from years studying transmission footage, but seeing it in person was breathtaking. At the end of the procession stood Queen Lyria of Azura, her presence immediately commanding. Unlike the others, whose light patterns stayed within the blue-green spectrum, hers shimmered with complex violets and golds that seemed to dance across her elegant form. The neural translator offered rough interpretations: curiosity, assessment, cautious welcome. Nikolai approached and bowed precisely at the angle their cultural briefings had specified. "Your luminescence, I bring greetings from Earth and the United Planetary Alliance. We are honored by your welcome." The Queen's eyes, deep amethyst with flecks of silver, studied him intently. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, while light patterns accentuated her words with emotional context the translator couldn't fully capture. "Ambassador Thorne," she said, "Azura acknowledges Earth's diplomatic gesture. You have traveled far to stand before us." A ripple of golden light spread across her shoulders. "Interest. Evaluation. Distance is no obstacle to building understanding between our peoples," Nikolai responded, noting how her pattern shifted at his words. The formal introductions continued as they entered the Crystal Palace, an architectural marvel carved from a single massive crystal formation. The diplomatic team was escorted to their quarters, while Nikolai attended a preliminary meeting with the Queen's Advisory Council. As days passed, Nikolai found himself increasingly captivated by the complexity of Azurian communication. Their spoken language was only half the message. The bioluminescent patterns conveyed emotional context, emphasis, and cultural nuances impossible to fully translate. During the 3rd negotiation session, when discussing territorial boundaries, Queen Lyria's pattern suddenly flashed crimson. The council members stiffened. "The proposed terms disrespect our ancestral territories," she stated, her voice perfectly controlled while her skin betrayed stronger emotion. Nikolai, recognizing the signals from his research, shifted approach immediately. "Perhaps I've misunderstood. Would your luminescence explain the historical significance of the Cygnus Nebula outposts?" A subtle shift, violet replacing red. "Surprise. Reassessment. You wish to understand our perspective?" she asked, her head tilting slightly. "I cannot negotiate what I do not comprehend," Nikolai replied honestly. For the first time, Lyria's patterns displayed a complex shimmer that wasn't in any of his reference materials. The council exchanged glances. "Then we shall educate you, Ambassador," she said, "beginning tomorrow. Privately, so cultural misinterpretations do not complicate our discussions." As Nikolai bowed in acceptance, he caught a fleeting pattern across her skin, one that seemed directed solely at him, brief yet unmistakably different from her public display. The treaty negotiations had officially begun, but something else was illuminating between them. Something neither their governments had anticipated. The private chamber where Queen Lyria received Nikolai was intimate compared to the grand negotiation halls. Crystalline walls reflected soft ambient light, while a shallow pool of bioluminescent water cast gentle waves of blue across the ceiling. "Your language fascinates me," Nikolai admitted as they settled across from each other. "The neural translator captures your words, but misses much of what your light patterns convey." Lyria's skin rippled with a gentle pattern Nikolai was beginning to recognize as amusement. Most species never notice the difference. They hear our words and assume that is all there is to understand. Over the next weeks, their official, cultural, exchange sessions became the highlight of Nikolai's diplomatic mission. While formal negotiations proceeded slowly with the council, these private lessons accelerated his understanding exponentially. "Emotions shape our light," Lyria explained during their 5th session, demonstrating a complex pattern across her shoulders and arms. "This expresses contemplative hope, something between optimism and uncertainty." Nikolai attempted to sketch the pattern in his notes. "Our languages have words for complex emotions, but nothing so immediate. Perhaps that is why your species values poetry," she observed. "You create with words what we express directly through light." During their 8th session, Nikolai was attempting to categorize subtle variations in diplomatic expressions when Lyria suddenly asked, "Do humans never communicate through touch?" "We do, but differently," he explained. "Touch can convey comfort, affection, romantic interest, but not specific thoughts." "Interesting." Her skin shimmered with what he now recognized as scientific curiosity. "For us, direct contact can transfer emotional states, even specific impressions between individuals." "That's remarkable." Nikolai leaned forward, genuinely fascinated. "Is that why Azurians maintain such formal distance in public?" "Precisely. Casual contact would create inappropriate intimacy." Her explanation was interrupted when Nikolai accidentally knocked over his water glass. Both reached to catch it simultaneously, and their hands connected. The sensation was electric. Where their skin touched, Lyria's bioluminescence intensified, and Nikolai felt a sudden rush of foreign emotion, curiosity tinged with something warmer, more personal, flowing into him like a current. They jerked apart, Nikolai gasping, Lyria's skin pulsing with rapid patterns he couldn't interpret. I apologize," he stammered, heart racing inexplicably. "No apology needed." Her voice was controlled, but her light patterns betrayed agitation. "Now you understand why we are careful with contact." The incident should have reinforced their professional boundaries. Instead, it awakened something neither could dismiss. In subsequent meetings, they found reasons to sit closer. Their discussions of cultural differences became increasingly personal. "Do you never find your position isolating?" Nikolai asked during their 12th session. Lyria's patterns dimmed momentarily. "A queen belongs to her people first. Personal connections are secondary." "That sounds familiar," he admitted. 20 years in diplomatic service leaves little room for lasting relationships. When their hands accidentally brushed again while examining a star chart, neither pulled away immediately. The emotional transfer was gentler this time, a shared loneliness, a mutual recognition. As Nikolai departed that evening, royal advisor Vexalia observed him leaving the queen's chambers. Her skin flashed patterns of suspicion and concern that required no translation. The following morning, during treaty negotiations, Nikolai noticed the council watching him differently. When Lyria entered, her formal patterns never wavered, but when their eyes briefly met, a small private flicker of light appeared at her wrist, meant only for him. He understood its meaning perfectly, caution but not regret. The gardens of the Crystal Palace offered rare privacy. Located at the convergence of 3 moonbeams, the crystalline flora absorbed and refracted light in ways that confused most surveillance systems. It was here that Nikolai received an unexpected message to meet the queen after midnight. "We shouldn't be meeting like this," he said when Lyria appeared between luminous flower formations, wearing simpler attire than her formal court dress. "Perhaps not," she agreed, her skin displaying subtle patterns of nervousness and anticipation, "but there are matters I cannot discuss in formal settings." They walked among the crystal blooms, speaking of diplomatic progress, while gradually drifting closer together. The treaty negotiations had reached a critical phase, with territorial boundaries and military presence in shared space remaining contentious points. Your council seems resistant to compromise on the Cygnus outposts, Nikolai observed. The council follows tradition, Lyria replied, her light patterns revealing frustration her voice concealed. They remember wars with other species who promised peace while positioning for advantage. Earth has no such intentions, he assured her. I believe you, she said softly, but my belief alone is insufficient. I must govern according to my people's interests, not personal inclinations. The word personal pulsed with a distinctive light pattern that made Nikolai's breath catch. Is that what this is? He asked carefully. Personal? Lyria stopped walking, turning to face him fully. In the garden's privacy, her bioluminescent patterns changed, displaying colors and rhythms he'd never seen in formal settings. Intimate, unguarded expressions. What I'm about to do breaks countless protocols, she said, but you deserve to understand what cannot be explained. She slowly extended her hand, palm upward. An invitation. Nikolai hesitated only briefly before placing his hand in hers. The connection bloomed between them. Not just emotion this time, but memories, impressions, fragments of experience. He felt the weight of her crown, the isolation of leadership, centuries of careful diplomatic calculation. He sensed her growing fascination with humans, with him specifically, his directness, his genuine curiosity, his respect for her culture, and beneath it all, unmistakable attraction. When they finally separated, Nikolai was breathless. That was, now you understand, Lyria whispered, her entire body illuminated with patterns expressing vulnerability and desire. This connection, it shouldn't exist, yet it does. What happens now? He asked. Instead of answering verbally, Lyria moved closer, her light patterns asking a question. Nikolai nodded and she placed her palm against his cheek. The kiss that followed transcended physical sensation. Where their lips met, light seemed to flow between them, carrying currents of longing, wonder, and forbidden joy. Nikolai felt himself responding not just physically but emotionally, his human feelings somehow translating into patterns of light that only she could perceive. They separated at the sound of approaching guards, but the connection lingered between them like an invisible thread. Tomorrow's negotiation is crucial, Lyria whispered. Whatever happens there, remember what you felt tonight. Nikolai returned to his quarters in a daze, his mind replaying their encounter. He never noticed the shadow that detached itself from behind a crystal formation. Royal Advisor Vexalia, her skin displaying patterns of shock and calculation. At dawn, a formal summons arrived. Nikolai was escorted not to the negotiation chamber, but to a private council room where 3 senior advisors awaited, their light patterns radiating stern disapproval. Ambassador Thorn, Vexalia began, you have compromised our queen and endangered these negotiations. You have a choice. End all private contact with her luminescence and proceed strictly according to protocol, or we terminate discussions and recommend your immediate removal from Azura. As the ultimatum hung in the air, Nikolai realized the true complexity of what had illuminated between him and Lyria, and the impossible choice that now confronted them both. The isolation quarters assigned to Nikolai felt colder than the vacuum of space. 3 days had passed since the ultimatum, during which all his communications were monitored and direct access to Queen Lyria forbidden. The negotiations continued, but now conducted through intermediaries, himself represented by his second-in-command, Dr. Maya Chen, and Lyria by Royal Advisor Vexalia. They're deliberately sabotaging the process, Maya reported during her brief permitted visit. Every concession we offer is met with new demands. It's as if they're trying to make the treaty impossible. Nikolai paced the crystalline floor. That's exactly what they're doing. Vexalia represents the conservative faction that has always opposed alliance with Earth. What happened between you and the Queen? Maya asked carefully. The Azurians are circulating rumors about inappropriate cultural contamination. We connected, he answered simply. In a way their traditions forbid, but that might actually bridge our differences. That night, unable to sleep, Nikolai was startled by a soft chime from the communication panel, a restricted channel supposedly inaccessible in his quarters. Lyria's face appeared, her skin dimmed to near darkness. We have 3 minutes before they detect this transmission, she said without preamble. Are you safe? He asked immediately. My position is secure, but our treaty is not. Her light patterns flickered with urgency. Vexalia has convinced half the council that you manipulated me through our contact. That's absurd. Politics rarely concerns itself with truth. A brief pattern of affection crossed her shoulders. Nikolai, I've been researching Earth's history. Your species has overcome similar prejudices before. Understanding dawned. You're suggesting we make our connection public? The political risks are substantial, she acknowledged. But continuing as we are guarantees failure. The council meets tomorrow to vote on severing negotiations permanently. What do you need from me? Her light patterns shifted to a complex sequence he recognized as determination mingled with hope. Be ready. When I send the signal, come to the Grand Assembly. And Nikolai, her patterns changed to something deeply personal. What we shared in the garden was real. The transmission ended, leaving Nikolai with a desperate plan and a heart full of impossible yearning. The following day, as the council prepared to vote, alarms suddenly blared throughout the Crystal Palace. Security protocols activated, automatically transporting all high-ranking officials, including the Earth delegation, to the Grand Assembly Hall for emergency gathering. In the confusion, Nikolai found himself standing just meters from Lyria on the central platform. Her royal guards moved to separate them, but she raised her hand. Enough deception, she announced, her voice ringing through the hall while her skin blazed with patterns of absolute authority. The future of both our peoples hangs in balance, yet we cling to outdated fears. She extended her hand toward Nikolai. Every Azurian in the room displayed shock in their light patterns. Your luminescence, Vexalia protested. This human has corrupted. He has illuminated truth, Lyria interrupted. As have I for him. Nikolai stepped forward, ignoring the guard's threatening postures, and took her offered hand. The connection between them flared visibly, his emotions somehow triggering responsive patterns across her skin, her light seeming to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Gasps echoed through the assembly. What you witness, Lyria addressed the stunned crowd, is not corruption but evolution. The very compatibility that makes us fear humans is what makes alliance valuable. We can understand each other in ways neither species has experienced before. As they stood united, Nikolai felt an overwhelming rush of emotion from her, determination, affection, and a fierce hope that transcended diplomatic calculation. For the first time in his career, personal connection and professional duty aligned perfectly. And in that moment, with her hand in his and her light synchronizing with his emotions, he knew they had found a path forward, for their peoples and themselves. The newly constructed Earth Embassy on Azura shimmered in the light of 3 setting moons. Inside the private diplomatic residence, Nikolai reviewed the final amendments to the historic treaty that would be signed the following day. A soft chime announced a visitor, Queen Lyria arriving without her usual entourage, her skin displaying subtle patterns of anticipation. The council has unanimously approved the final terms, she said as she entered. After 6 months of negotiation, we have peace, Nikolai smiled, and a cultural exchange program that will transform both our civilizations. Following their dramatic demonstration in the Grand Assembly, they had channeled the revelation of their unique connection into a diplomatic breakthrough. The Azurians' ability to share emotions through touch, once kept secret as a cultural vulnerability, became the cornerstone of a new kind of alliance. 50 human diplomats have already begun training in light language, Nikolai noted, setting aside his work, and 30 Azurian cultural ambassadors depart for Earth next month. Lyria's patterns shifted to something more personal as she moved closer. The public aspects of our work are proceeding perfectly, but I didn't come to discuss diplomacy tonight. The formal distance they maintained in public dissolved as she approached him. Since their revelation, they had established careful protocols, professional in public, personal in private. Tonight was decidedly the latter. We have created something unprecedented, she said softly, her light patterns expressing emotions the neural translator couldn't begin to capture. Nikolai reached for her hand, and the connection between them flared immediately. After months of practice, he had learned to project his emotions in ways she could perceive as patterns. A human learning to speak in light. Something worth protecting, he agreed, drawing her closer. Their bodies met in a kiss that transcended physical sensation. Where their skin touched, light seemed to flow between them, her natural bioluminescence responding to his emotions, his body somehow learning to receive and reflect her patterns. They had discovered that prolonged contact created a unique synchronization, a feedback loop of sensation and emotion neither species had experienced before. Her hands traced patterns across his chest, each touch sending waves of shared pleasure through their connection. His fingers followed the natural contours of her form, eliciting cascades of light that expressed what words in any language could not. "I feel everything you feel," she whispered against his neck, her light patterns pulsing in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat. They moved to the sleeping chamber, where specially designed crystals amplified and reflected their shared light, surrounding them in a private universe of illuminated emotion. What followed was a dance of light and sensation, two bodies learning each other's rhythms, two different species discovering harmony in their differences. Where human passion met Azurian light sensitivity, something entirely new emerged. Each caress intensified their connection, every shared breath deepening the synchronization between heartbeat and light patterns, until it became impossible to distinguish where one consciousness ended and the other began. In that perfect unity, boundaries between diplomat and queen, human and Azurian, dissolved completely. Later, as they lay together in the afterglow, their bodies still emanating synchronized patterns of contentment, Lyria traced symbols across Nikolai's chest. "The Council has proposed a permanent position for you on Azura," she said. "Official ambassador in perpetuity," Nikolai smiled. "And Earth's diplomatic corps has requested your presence for a state visit, the first Azurian monarch to set foot on human soil." "We've created a new protocol," Lyria observed, her patterns displaying quiet pride, neither species compromising its nature, but both evolving together. The following day, when they signed the historic treaty before representatives of both worlds, they maintained proper diplomatic distance. But everyone present noticed how the Queen's light pattern seemed to respond to the human ambassador's emotions, and how he somehow understood messages no translator could detect. What had begun as forbidden now represented hope, proof that differences could become strengths when embraced rather than feared. Their private connection had transformed into a bridge between civilizations, illuminating a path neither world could have discovered alone. As Nikolai and Lyria exchanged formal diplomatic gestures before the assembled dignitaries, a subtle pattern passed between them, a promise visible only to each other, written in a language of light and emotion that transcended the stars themselves.